You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
And welcome, folks, to hour number 2. This is the On Point with Victor show. I am Victor Armendariz, and this is America's Web Radio. All right, folks, so let's get into some more of this discussion that we're having today about history and the true history, the hard truths. Let me tell you the story of a Democrat sheriff versus a Republican sheriff, because I'll bet you that most of you have never heard this. There was a Democrat sheriff, and I'm not even going to. This is history, so this was quite a few years ago. But there was a Democrat sheriff who turned a black man over to a lynch mob. I don't remember what he was arrested for, but the sheriff, the Democrat sheriff, when the lynch mob came, he turned him over. And this happened in Tulsa. You may know it as the Tulsa Massacre, but I'll bet you've never been taught this part, because this is what led to the Tulsa Massacre. You know, when the Tulsa Massacre is taught, they conveniently leave out these details that I'm telling you now. So there was a Democrat sheriff in Tulsa. They had arrested a black man, not sure what he did. I don't remember. I should remember, but I don't. So my apologies. But the lynch mob came for him, and the Democrat sheriff turned him over to the lynch mob. So what did Tulsa do? The people of Tulsa, in response, threw out the Democrat sheriff, and they elected a Republican sheriff. And that Republican sheriff, you know what he did? The Republican sheriff hired black deputies. Oh my gosh. And see, this you will not be taught. But so the Democrat sheriff ousted, a Republican sheriff elected, and the first thing the Republican sheriff does is hire black deputies. So one day, there was a black man that was arrested by the black sheriff and some of these black deputies. This black man was arrested for groping a white woman, and he was being detained. Well, one day, not long after he was detained, the lynch mob came for him. But you know what the Republican sheriff did? The Republican sheriff said, no, I'm not turning him over to you, the lynch mob. He'll stand trial. And that's what led to the Tulsa Massacre. Now, have you ever been taught that? I guarantee you, most of you, if not 98, 99% of you, have never been taught that. So, Democrat sheriff turns over black criminal to a lynch mob. The people throw out the Democrat sheriff, and they elect a Republican sheriff. Republican sheriff hires black deputies. They arrest another black criminal. The lynch mob comes for him, and the black sheriff says, no, we will not turn him over to a lynch mob. We have laws and we have justice, and he will see his day in court, or however that played out. But that led to the Tulsa Massacre. So who didn't turn the black guy over to the lynch mob? The Republican sheriff didn't turn him over. Who did turn him over? The Democrat sheriff. You see, folks, this is why the history of the Democrat Party is constantly being hidden from you. They do not want you to know this truth. And again, I'm not bringing this up so we can rehash history and hate somebody because they agree or vote Democrat. No, I want to educate people. I want to bring people together and let people understand that you do not have to be loyal to a letter D just because your skin color might be brown or might be black. And if you support a Republican candidate or a Libertarian candidate, hopefully if that Republican is a candidate, hopefully they are a Constitution-loving, liberty-loving, freedom-loving candidate, Freedom Caucus-style Republican, not an establishment Republican. Hopefully they're one of those. But if you support a Republican candidate, or if you support a Libertarian candidate, if you support an independent candidate, you're not racist. If your skin color is brown or black, and you want to support somebody because they love the Constitution of this country, because they love the United States, because they speak positively of the United States, because they want to stand together, all colors. They want to stand together as an American, that doesn't make you a racist. But the Democrat Party today will tell you that you're an Uncle Tom or an Uncle Julio if you stand with a Republican, freedom-loving, Constitution-loving candidate. That is messed up, folks. My goodness, do I need to remind you, Martin Luther King did not want his children and generations to come after him, did not want them judged by what? He didn't want them judged by the color of their skin. He wanted them judged by the character, the content of their character. What a novel concept. But I will venture to tell you today that when Martin Luther King is taught into inner city schools and or any schools around the country, that phrase probably isn't taught anymore. The one of, if not the most important quote by Martin Luther King, "Judge me not for my skin color, but for the content of my character." Probably the most important quote that man uttered is probably not being taught today. Why? Because the Democrats won't allow it, and critical race theory won't allow it. Because you see, Martin Luther King wanted people valued for who they were. He wanted them valued for being an American, for being a good American. The color of their skin was inconsequential in the eyes of Martin Luther King. But you and me and everyone today are being told we must judge everything by the color of the skin. Folks, which party today judges everything by one's color? Which party today puts you in a box? It is the Democrat Party, folks. The Democrat Party looks at you and sees first the color of your skin. Then they put you in a box. If you're brown, oh, you're oppressed. If you're black skin, oh, you're oppressed. You got to go in that box. Oh, you're gay? Well, you're going in this oppressed box. Oh, you're transgender, whatever. Then they put you in a box. But it all starts by your skin color. Because if you're brown, yellow, or black, according to the Democrats, you can't disagree with them and you can't question them. Because if you do, then somehow, well, then you're a white Mexican, or you're a white black, or you're a white Asian. You're laughing at me maybe, or maybe some of you are going, what? What are you talking about, Victor? Well, folks, go a couple of months back and look at that teacher, the critical race practicing teacher in, I think it was LA County, when she was pulled over by a Mexican brown police officer. And she looked at him and she said, "You're never going to be white. You're not a white Mexican. You're never going to be white." But she accused him of being an oppressor to her. Why? Because he was brown and he had the audacity to be or hold the job of police officer. You see, folks, that is how critical race theory works. If you are brown and black-skinned or yellow-skinned, then you can't be a police officer because that's a signification of a white oppressor. This is the crap that they're trying to teach. Now, folks, what good can come of that? First of all, it's not true. Do you know how many black officers get up every day? How many brown police officers get up every day? How many yellow police officers get up every day? And they will use their body to defend you no matter how you vote, no matter how you look, no matter what gender you think you are. They go to work every day to protect people like you. But the Democrat Party today is trying to tell you that somehow they're Uncle Toms and Uncle Julios and Uncle Changs if they dare deviate from the narrative of today's Democrat Party. Folks, it's messed up. It really is messed up. I mean, oh my gosh, folks. It would be laughable if it weren't so serious. So, okay, let me move on. Let me give you some more history that you need to know. So I told you about the Republican sheriff and the Democrat sheriff and the Tulsa massacre. So I told you about that. And look, folks, if you've got kids in school, you need to be looking at what they're learning. Because if they're being taught the Tulsa Massacre and they're not being taught what led to the Tulsa Massacre, you need to teach them. It is up to you, the parent. I mean, my goodness. Because the government schools aren't going to do it. Even if you're in a private school, you need to make sure they're being taught the truth. You need to be sure, folks. Be sure. So, okay. Let me move on to some more examples, folks, and then we'll get to some more news. We'll get to some news of today. But look, when you hear the Democrats, and you're going to hear them, I mean, they're already started, but they're going to, Asian Pacific Islander Month or Asian Day, and they talk about the crimes. They don't want to talk about the crimes of say, a black-skinned person or a brown-skinned person attacking an Asian person. Now, that doesn't count. That doesn't fit the narrative. They have to go find a white person somewhere who says something mean to an Asian person. But when you start to see this, because they're pushing this now, the Asian violence thing, look to them and ask them, well, who was the only president of the United States who put Asian people in an internment camp? Who was the president that used executive fiat and put Asian people into an internment camp? Why, by golly, it was a Democrat president. So start asking questions. Get back, or I guess for lack of a better term, push back a little bit. When these Democrat elected officials, when they just think you're too dumb to know history, why don't you just show them that you do know your history and question them? I'd give anything for a journalist to look at Pelosi, Schumer, or AOC, or anyone else in the moronic squad, or Biden. I would love for somebody to catch when Biden stops to answer a question, because they won't let him answer questions. But I would love to see a journalist say, "Hey, what party was the president that put Asian people into an internment camp?" I would love to see that question asked, folks. You want to see Biden pee his pants? Ask him that question. Oh my goodness, that would just be great. So, okay, folks, let's move on a little bit. Let me give you another example. Since we're into the cancel culture and the woke culture, why hasn't Senator Robert Byrd of West Virginia, why hasn't he been canceled? Why hasn't his statue been taken down? Why hasn't his writings been taken away? Why hasn't the history of his Senate career, why hasn't it been wiped away and canceled? Well, I'll tell you why. Senator Byrd was a Democrat, and the Democrats are trying to rewrite the history of Senator Byrd. Let me tell you the history, folks. I'm going to tell you some more history about the Democrat Party. I mean, folks, you hear about Jim Crow. You hear Stacey Abrams telling you, oh my gosh, the Georgia voting law is going back to Jim Crow. Well, folks, have you stopped to ask yourself, what were Jim Crow laws back in the day? And where did they come from? Well, you know what? They came from the likes of Bull Connor, Democrat. They came from the likes of Robert Byrd, Democrat. They came from the likes of George Wallace, Democrat. And don't give me this business that the Democrats switched to Republicans and the Republicans switched to Democrats. Folks, George Wallace was a Democrat till the day he died. Robert Byrd was a Democrat till the day he died. Bull Connor was a Democrat till the day he died. They were Democrats from the beginning, and they were Democrats at the end. They didn't switch parties at any time. Now, did you at some point have Southern Democrat voters who switched to the Republican Party? Why, by golly, yes, you did. And why? Because the Republican Party was the party to free the slaves. The Republican Party was the party of equality. The Democrat Party was not the was not the party of equality back then, folks. Not like what they're trying to tell you today. Look, folks, the Republican Party, you want to know a little history of the Republican Party? The Republican Party was never for slavery. The Republican Party never put forth a slavery bill. The Republican Party has always been against slavery. The Republican Party, they're the party that voted for the Civil Rights Bill of 1864. Without the Republicans, it wouldn't have passed. And I'm going to get into a little bit of that in a minute, folks. History you've probably never been taught about the Civil Rights Act of 1864. But folks, the Republican Party has never been a party of slavery. The Democrat Party has been. And I'm giving you example after example. So let's take the break. And when I get back, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the Democrat Bill Connor, Robert Byrd, and George Wallace. So we'll be back. Don't go anywhere. This is America's Web Radio.
My name is Kyle Hayes, a motorsports student at Alfred State College. Every year, Alfred State students compete in the Great Race, which is a cross-country time endurance rally for vintage vehicles. As you can imagine, it's pretty costly. I'm asking for your help. Your donation can make it possible for these students to live their passion and promote the vintage automobile industry. Please visit our site at give.alfredstate.edu and search Great Race to learn more and help us reach our goal. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Dr. Mike Karuchak. Have you ever wondered what doctors talk about amongst themselves? If you do, join us on the Doctor's Lounge and hear the doctors' conversations amongst themselves. Join me and my co-host, Dr. Hal Schertz, every Thursday morning, 8 to 9 a.m.
Whether cruising the strip in a 57 Chevy or taking the family on a vacation in a 71 Oldsmobile Vista Cruiser, you need to tune in to Classic Cars with Steve Ronaldo and Jim Weber every Saturday from 8 to 9 a.m. on americaswebradio.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages, join me, Roger B., every Tuesday at 1400 hours right here on America's Web Radio for the Locked and Loaded Show. We will talk about guns, weapons, ammo, gun accessories, prepping, and so much more. So be sure to join us every Tuesday at 1400 or 2 p.m. for Locked and Loaded on America's Web Radio.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
And welcome back, folks. Welcome back. This is the On Point with Victor show. I am Victor Armendariz. Hey, I want to deviate for a minute, folks. We're going to get away from the race talk for a minute and the history lesson just for a second. And I just had an awesome listener remind me. I meant to do this last week, and I forgot. I know not all of you are soccer fans, but you know that I am, and I am the host, so I get to talk about this for a second. The Euro Cup is going on right now, the Europe Cup, Euro 2020, which wasn't played in 2020. We all know why, but now it's being played now. And basically, this is this is second to the World Cup. It's the world's best teams as they compete to be the champion of Europe. And last week, I think it was one of the first games, Denmark was playing Finland. And in the middle of it might have been the first 10 minutes of the match, but there's a player by the name of Eriksen for Denmark. Really, really quality, great player. He plays for the Premier League in England. Just an outstanding soccer player, footballer, as he's known in Europe. But this Eriksen was playing for his country, Denmark, and had passed the ball and collapsed on the field in the middle of this game. The man went into cardiac arrest. I have never seen, in all the soccer games I have watched in my life, I've never seen a soccer player go into cardiac arrest during a game. You think of these guys as being so fit, and this is just an example, which let this be the On Point with Victor medical message. No matter how fit you are, ladies and gentlemen, stick up with your physicals. I didn't, and I paid the price for it, and I'm still paying the price for it. So just let it be a lesson from my experience, but also from what we saw from Eriksen, the soccer player. Stick with your yearly physicals. Go to the doctor when you need to. If something hurts, it's probably a reason it's hurting. Go get it checked out. But Eriksen is in the awesome shape that man is in. Clearly had a heart issue and went into cardiac arrest. Thank God one of his teammates immediately started CPR. So here we are in the middle of this soccer game, for you Americans. This guy makes a pass, collapses on the ground. His teammate immediately notices, oh my gosh, he's not breathing, clears his airway and administers CPR. And then basically saving this man's life before the paramedics got there. But then the paramedics got there. He was dead on the field, folks, dead in this soccer game. But he was taken away, and I'm happy to report that he is doing fantastic. He's still recovering in the hospital, but he's doing fantastic. So I just want, say a prayer, give some awesome thoughts. Even if you're not a fan of soccer, as a sports fan, give your best to this guy Erickson, who is recovering from having a cardiac arrest during the middle of a soccer game. I mean, it's unbelievable. And if you are a soccer fan and you're not watching the Euro Cups, well, you are missing some of the best soccer you'll ever see. It is just awesome, awesome, awesome. I did have someone email me and ask me what were my predictions for the Euro Cup. A soccer fan that a lot of soccer fans hit me up, folks, on Instagram, and they do listen to this show as well as do a lot of motorcycle riders. So I had some soccer fans hit me up and they asked me my prediction. Look, my heart wants to tell you that Spain is going to win, but the soccer player in me realizes that Spain is not the team they were a few years ago. Right now, if I had to pick, I would tell you I think Italy has a great shot. I think Belgium has a great shot. I think England has a good shot, but England just doesn't seem to pull it together when they need to. France, they've got a wonderful shot. So it's going to be great. So if you're a soccer fan and you're not watching the Euro Cup, you're missing out, and you should watch. If you're new to soccer and you want to see what it's all about, then watch the Euro Cup, because that's some of the best soccer you will ever see. Not to take away from Copa America, which is also going on. Argentina, they looked good last night, but it ain't Euro. I mean, the Euro Cup is it's awesome. It's second only to the World Cup. So, okay, so that's all I'm going to say about that. But again, prayers and thoughts go out to Erickson and his family in Denmark. Speedy recovery to him as he continues to recover from his cardiac arrest during the middle of a soccer game. So, okay, so let me move on and get back to the history lesson that I'm giving you today. Again, folks, I didn't plan on this show to be a history lesson today, but this is important stuff because of what's going on, because the Democrat Party today is trying to shove critical race theory down every student's throat. And wokeism and the woke mob is trying to cancel everyone that doesn't agree with them. And you got Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and the Democrat Party today that is trying to convince you if you don't agree with them, then you're a white supremacist. Even if you're brown skin and black skin and you don't agree with the Biden administration, then somehow you're a supremacist. I mean, it's unbelievable what's going on right now, folks. And the Biden administration is trying to legalize going after their political opponents. That's what's going on today, folks, and that's just some of today's news that we'll get to in a little bit. But let me finish a few more things about this history lesson that we've been going down today, folks. I mentioned before the last break. I mentioned Bull Connor and Robert Byrd and George Wallace. I mentioned Stacey Abrams talking about Jim Crow laws and how the Republican Party is the Jim Crow party, and how the Georgia election law that does nothing but make it A, easier for people to vote, B, it just makes you have to verify who you are and who you say you are before you can vote. Folks, you can't get on an airplane without an ID. You can't get a bank account without an ID. But according to the Democrat Party, black people and brown people don't have bank accounts and don't fly around on airplanes because the Democrat Party is trying to tell you that they don't have IDs and IDs shouldn't be used to vote. It is preposterous and it is ridiculous and it is insulting. It should be insulting to every black person and every Hispanic person, brown person. You should all be as offended as all can be when the Democrat Party tells you you're too stupid to have an ID. It's unbelievable. But anyway, look, folks, I'm not angry. I'm just right. And this is the On Point with Victor show. I'm wearing the shirt today. And on the back of this shirt, it says, I'm not angry. I'm just right. So, all right, folks. So let me tell you. So when Stacey Abrams and the Democrats they're trying to pin Jim Crow on the Republicans, folks, let me take you back again to the history of the Democrat Party. Jim Crow laws were put forth by Democrats, elected Democrats. Bull Connor was just one of them. Robert Byrd was one of them. George Wallace was one of them. All of them were Democrats, and all of them were segregationists. All of them were against the Civil Rights Act, they were against civil rights, period. Folks, you can look it up for yourself. If you have the courage out there, if you're a Democrat voter and you're listening to me right now, and you have the courage to learn some history, then go do a DuckDuckGo search. You might even be able to do a Google search, but do a DuckDuckGo search and just put in Bull Connor, put in Robert Byrd, put in George Wallace, put in history of Jim Crow laws. And it was the Democrat South that did it. the Democrat elected officials who were Democrats back then, and they were Democrats when they died. They didn't switch parties, which is one of the myths that you will be told. Now, again, did some Democrat voters switch to the Republican parties? Yeah, they did. Because the Republican Party was the party of freedom. They were the party of equality, not the Democrats. And so there were Democrat voters back then that did realize that and did change and become Republicans, which, you know what? Some of you should do it today. Oh, my goodness, folks. But, all right, so let me give you a little bit more information. So Robert Byrd is one that I'm gonna educate you on right now, because Senator Byrd, he was a senator from West Virginia, and it wasn't that long ago that I believe Obama spoke at the funeral for Robert Byrd. Now picture this, folks. Now, remember this: Obama spoke at his funeral. Hillary Clinton to this day will tell you that Senator Byrd was her mentor and a great man. But what they don't want you to know is the history of Senator Byrd. So let me tell you the history of Democrat-elected Senator Robert Byrd. And some of us, you'll hear me refer to him sometimes, and on past shows, you've heard me refer to him as Robert KKK Byrd. You know why? And let me remind you, Senator Robert Byrd was a Democrat until the day he died. Well, folks, before he became an elected Democrat, he was a member of the KKK. In fact, he was a recruiter. He was a recruiter for the Ku Klux Klan. And that led him into politics.
Imperial Wizard.
And he was, yes, thank you, Legend Dave. Robert Byrd was not just a member of the KKK, he was the Imperial Wizard, the Grand Wizard of the KKK. You see, folks, the KKK gave themselves positions and hierarchy. And Senator Democrat, all his life, elected Democrat Senator Byrd was a Imperial Grand Wizard for the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan. That is the man that to this day Hillary Clinton will tell you was a great man and was her mentor. That is the man who has the history of recruiting for the KKK that Obama said wonderful things for at his funeral. Now, look, folks, I don't have a problem with people saying they've had a change of heart or people respecting somebody at their funeral. But if you are going to tell me that you want to cancel me because I question Democrats, if you want to cancel me because I have the audacity to educate people on the true history of the Democrat Party and how it was founded and what the Democrats did throughout the years, you want to cancel me for that? Well, if that is your standard, then you want to cancel me for telling the truth. If that's your standard, if YouTube wants to put me in jail for telling the truth, then you must cancel Senator Byrd. You must cancel Hillary Clinton. You must cancel Obama. And you're going to have to cancel Joe Biden, because they have all spoken to the greatness that was Senator Robert KKK Byrd. Folks, this is the history that the Democrats do not want you to know, and they're not teaching your kids this. And many of you haven't been taught this. But it's time you know the truth. And I have told you, this is the On Point with Victor show, where logic and common sense rules the day, and that includes the truth-telling. Truth-telling will rule the day on this show. So, let me tell you what Robert Byrd, Democrat-elected, I cannot stress this enough, Democrat-elected Senator Robert Byrd spoke against. This man, Democrat, stood up in 1964 when the Civil Rights Act was being debated. He stood up and spoke against Civil Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act. He spoke against it for 14 straight hours. Democrat Senator Byrd was trying to filibuster the Civil Rights Act of 1864. The Democrats were behind him then, and they will stick up for Byrd today. All while trying to tell you that if you disagree with the Democrat Party, or if you question the Democrat Party, somehow you are the racist. The Democrat Party today is trying to rewrite the history and tell you that the Republican Party is the party of racism. No, ladies and gentlemen, no. The Democrat Party has the history of being the party of racism. The Democrat Party fought against the Civil Rights Act of 1864, and they were led by Democrat Senator Robert Byrd, who stood on June 10th. Oh my goodness, folks. We talked about Juneteenth. So 9 days in 1964, 9 days before the 19th, the Juneteenth, 9 days before that, on June 10th in 1964, Democrat Robert Byrd, and supported by other Democrats, on June 10th, filibustered and spoke out against, for 14 hours straight, against the Civil Rights Act. So the party that is trying to tell you today that they are Juneteenth was the party that on June 10th was fighting against the Civil Rights Act of 1964. That's the Democrat Party, folks. That is the history of the Democrat Party. Now, again, I am not telling you that the Republican Party is perfect. By golly, there are so many establishment Republicans that I want to throw out of office, and I hope and pray get thrown out of office in 2022 and in 2024. But I don't want them replaced by Democrats. I want them replaced by Constitution-loving, freedom-loving, United States-loving, liberty-loving conservative candidates or libertarian candidates or independent candidates. My only requirement to vote for a candidate is not are they a D or an R. It is, do they love the country of the United States? Do they want to help the people of the United States? Do they want to put the citizen of the United States first? Do they love freedom? Do they love liberty? Are they willing to give up federal power to get back to what the Constitution states is there are 18 enumerated powers for the federal government. All else falls to the states. Are we willing to get back to smaller government and freedom to the people? That's the candidate I want. I don't care what letter they have by their name. But I will not support a Democrat today, and it's all of them, who is screaming for bigger government, screaming for more control over you, who is telling you because of your skin color, you should hate that person because of their skin color. That is coming from today's Democrat Party. Folks, segregation is being pushed forward today. There are colleges that are segregating lunchrooms and everything. It's blacks over here, whites over there, and everybody else over there. It is the Democrat Party that is putting people again today in segregated boxes, just as they did in 1964 and before that. That is the history of the Democrat Party, and I am just flabbergasted. And sometimes I stand in disbelief that it is today's Democrat Party that is bringing back some of the practices from the 60s of that Democrat Party. But the sad thing about today is so many brown people and black people are willingly being useful idiots to the segregation box creating Democrat Party that is today. It is just unbelievable, folks. It really is. So that is Senator Byrd. He was a Democrat till the day he died. He didn't switch parties, folks. He did not. And he fought against the civil rights. And you know what, folks? Still to this day, the Democrat Party will refer to Robert Byrd as the conscience of the Senate. What is the Democrat Party telling you, folks? What are they secretly trying to tell you? Because, folks, the Democrat Party is not the party that doesn't see color. They're not the party that wants to help all boats, lift all boats. They're not the party that wants to help minorities. Folks, I will tell you that the Democrat Party of today is the party that wants to hold minorities down. Because you can't be an elitist, all-powerful politician if you don't have a huge class of dependency that continues to vote for you and give you that power. So, folks, I mean, it is really, really time to wake up. It is time for you to wake up and ask yourself why. You know, folks, I tell you all the time, Ask yourself why. Why would these Democrat elected politicians push the segregation that they're pushing? Why would they push you to be in a box? Why would they convince you? Excuse me. Why would today's elected Democrats continue try to convince minorities that you're just not good enough? You're not smart enough to get an ID. You're not smart enough to hold a job. You're not smart enough to better yourself. You're not smart enough to vote on your own conscience. You're not smart enough to be an independent-minded thinker. That is what today's elected Democrat Party is trying to convince minorities. They are basically saying, if you have brown skin, if you have black skin, if you have yellow skin, that you're just not smart enough to make it on your own in a country that has a constitutional basis on equality to equal opportunity. But the Democrat Party is telling you that equal opportunity isn't good enough. Oh, no. They want equity in outcomes. Folks, the only way you're going to get equity in outcome is if you got most people being pushed down into the poverty level. It is horrible and disingenuous what the Democrats are trying to fool minorities on, just so they can gain and maintain power over you. Folks, look, there's no surprise why the Democrats want open borders. They want a new voting class. Because you know why? Too many of you black-skinned voters are starting to open your eyes, and you're not voting for Democrats anymore. You may not be voting for straight Republican, but you're starting to look at libertarians, you're looking at independents, and you are looking at some conservative Republicans, and you're voting for them. And the Democrats cannot stand it, nor can they allow it. So are we trying to figure out and help the black-on-black crimes going on in Chicago? No, we're not. You're being told it's white supremacy. You're being told to hate white people. Again, folks, today's elected Democrats they look at the minorities as people who cannot and are not smart enough to make it on their own. And the sooner you realize that, the better. I'm telling you, folks, this is the time has come. It really has. So, all right, let's get into some more topics of the day. You know, there's so much going on, and look, folks, if you guys have any questions about the history that I spoke about for the last hour and a half, then you know where to find me. Victor@americaswebradio.com. Victor@americaswebradio.com. So reach out and hit me with your questions, folks. There's no better way to lead yourself down the road of history than by beginning with asking questions. So don't hesitate. Ask me questions. You can challenge me if you want. If you think you can defeat my arguments, then hey, challenge me. I'll bring you on the show. Because everything I've told you today can be found and documented and verified through the pages of history. And that's just a fact. David.
Just one question, Senor. How do you rewrite history?
Oh, my goodness. I wish it weren't possible, but you do it by indoctrinating education. You do it by what the Democrats, with the help of some establishment Republicans, are doing and have been doing for years, by trying to house education through the Department of Education on the federal level.
Wait a second. What is history?
Well, that's a good question, David. I mean, history is how we've all gotten here today. You know, there would be no future were it not for the history of the past.
Isn't it sort of pictures of an event in writing?
Absolutely.
So how do you redo
How do you actually well, you don't.
I know you've got Adobe and all that.
I see where you're going.
And you can take a picture and
try and change it.
And change it a little bit here and there and put rabbit ears on Hillary's butt or whatever. But, history is history.
Yeah.
As soon as you walk out the door today, this show is over with.
It's history and in the archives.
Yep.
Yeah. Right.
So how can I go back and
but you know what?
Unsay what you said?
You know, that's so true, David, but I love it. I think I know where you're going with this, because when you look at big tech, what do? They splice and they cut and they edit.
Slice and dice.
And it's absolutely, and they try and they'll take words and sentences and completely shift them around to try to get to a narrative that they want to support.
Until they meet Derwich.
Right. It's exactly. So the only good thing is just as America's Web Radio is we have the archives of my show, and we can always go back and listen to the actual show. We can go back and find history and find the actual writings and find the actual and my goodness, now, recent history, everything is videotaped. Everybody's cell phone is a motion camera. I mean, so the interesting thing going forward is how do we dig up the actual videos when big tech tries to splice and dice and only put what they want you to see? Because, that brings me to a killing in Chicago this past weekend, David. I don't know if you saw this, but the true video's out there, but I'm sure they're going to try and slice and dice it. And I know most of the media won't even talk about this story, but when they do, they show very limited amount of this video. But if you watch the entire video, in Chicago over the weekend, ladies and gentlemen, 2 people were dragged out of their car and shot point blank. Killed on the streets of Chicago, in the middle of the street, people everywhere. And there was a closed circuit camera that caught all of this. So you see, folks, they had a Puerto Rican parade in Chicago, and there was a car with Puerto Rican flags. And these 2 occupants were, I believe, of Puerto Rican descent, and they were pulled out of their car by some gang thug people. I think about 6 of them, pulled them out of the car, and one of the thugs pulled out a gun, stood over them, and shot them. Let me tell you, the hero is the boyfriend. Even after being shot, threw his body on top of his girlfriend and took 2 or 3 more shots. He died. She's clinging on to life. And the only reason she's clinging on to life is because her boyfriend covered her with his body. So his dying breath was saving her. And why? Why? You look at that video, and listeners out there, look it up. David, if you've seen it or if you haven't seen it, you'll look at this video and you're going to go, this cannot be the United States. Cannot be the United States.
Look at what they've got for a mayor.
Yes. Oh, my gosh. Mary Low IQ Lightfoot is the mayor of Chicago. And David, she wouldn't come out and say, we are going to crack down on gangs. We're going to crack down on lawlessness. We're going to go into this and we're going to find these people. Because I don't think any of those assailants have been arrested. Instead, this crazy Mary Low IQ Lightfoot of Chicago, David, she is out there blaming guns. She actually blamed the AR-15. But David, ask me what kind of gun was used.
Probably a handgun.
It was a handgun. And 99% of the gun crime in Chicago and across the United States are committed with handguns. Not one AR-15. But yet, she's going to stand up and she's going to... Now look, this mayor, instead of taking action in Chicago, she's continuing to support defunding the police. In fact, Chicago just recently, they passed the law and were not allowing police officers to engage in foot chases. So now, let's say a police officer had been on the ground and witnessed this shooting, and as those assailants ran away, that officer would not have been allowed to chase those thugs down and give them the dirt nap that they deserve. Because the mayor of Chicago is all about defunding police and taking more of the fight out of the police. So I believe it was just last week or the week before, the police officers in Chicago are no longer allowed to go on to take foot chases. And then you have this weekend, you had 54 or 55 people shot in 2 days in Chicago, on the streets of Chicago. And you had these 2 innocent people pulled out of their car, put on the ground, and shot point blank, executed. One of them dead, one of them clinging on to life. And the mayor of Chicago wants to blame AR-15s, and she didn't stop there. She didn't stop there. The mayor of Chicago is blaming white people. Show me the white people in that video. I mean, other than the two that got killed, or the one that was killed and the one clinging on to life. But she's blaming AR-15s, which aren't used in crime, very, 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 very rarely. And she's blaming the suburbs that aren't even part of her city. She's blaming gun owners, and she wants to blame white gun owners. She actually started talking about white supremacy and racism. She's blaming racism for what's going on in Chicago. Need I remind Mayor Mary Low IQ Lightfoot? There hasn't been a Republican elected to the city of Chicago in decades. That city has been run by Democrats. That state is run by Democrats for the past decades, and decades. You can't blame a Republican when there's nowhere in sight. And you can't blame racism when the majority of your your crime is black on black. The gun victims in Chicago are 99% black. But yet,
there's not a snowballing chance in hell that I want to go to Chicago. Now, what happened? Did you see what's happening in Portland?
Oh, yes. There's another.
Yep. They've had their problems, obviously, but it's affected them so much that now they're running ads to come to Portland.
Yep.
And because they're, they're scared. They don't want to go to
Seattle, Portland. They have descended into complete chaos and lawlessness. And that's what happens when you defund the police. Now, David, I'm glad you mentioned Seattle.
No, I mentioned Portland.
Portland. You mentioned Portland, but it also reminds me of Seattle. Just last week, you had all members of the special trained task force. There's a special trained police force to do quick reactions when there's a lawlessness breaking out. They all resigned because the city of Seattle brought charges up against one of their fellow officers for doing his job. He didn't break a law. He didn't use excessive force. He merely went after a criminal, and they're prosecuting him for it. And so all 50 members resigned.
Good. I want to. There's always another side to the coin, and there was It wasn't a big deal, but it was dangerous yesterday on 400, and I decided to pull off and call the Roswell police, and I couldn't. They were the nicest folks you've ever talked to, and they had already dispatched. Somebody else had beat me to the call, which was great. There was a tire in the middle of the road, not a wheel, just a tire.
Right. But
and
that could kill a motorcyclist. So thank you, David, for doing that.
But I just want to commend and say, this whole garbage about how terrible the police are, and it takes. The one thing that I will say, it takes a certain personality to be a cop.
Oh, without a doubt.
And yet, I know I couldn't be for many reasons. I've got such a hot temper that, I would be the one with the AR-15.
Yeah, right.
But, and some of the people and some of the ways they drive here in Atlanta, they probably should be shot. But,
maybe.
It's still, it takes... And I respect anybody that puts on the uniform and wears the badge, and
especially today.
And I'm no better than anybody else. Yes, I've gotten my share of tickets, not many, but I, once in a while I might have a heavy foot, but
maybe.
But even at that, it wasn't their fault. It wasn't the gun's fault. It was my foot's fault.
Right.
And the stupid thing that's on top of my shoulders.
Exactly.
And, so...
Sometimes.
They are nice, and they do a hell of a job.
99% of the police officers in this country are hard-working men and women who put on the uniform, like I said before, and will put their body in front of a bullet to save people they don't even know. All while... the goal of the day is to just make it home to their families.
I started to say, can you think of any other job that you leave in the morning, you don't know whether you're coming home, nor does your spouse know whether you're coming home.
Right.
And I want to throw this out too, there are a lot of very good women police officers.
Oh, absolutely.
And they have the same problems that everybody else does. They walk out of the house and they don't know if they're coming back to see their kids or not.
And you know what? Nobody cares of their sexual preference. They put on a uniform and they put on the badge and they become an American police officer, an American citizen, a police officer, part of the brotherhood that is they're going to do everything they can to protect their brother and their sister, because it is a brotherhood and sisterhood. And they're going to do everything to protect people they don't even know. And like I said, and like you mentioned, David, all while just wanting to get home at the end of the day to see their family again. And that is true. There are very, very few occupations in this world where you put on your uniform and your name tag and your badge and you go out to do your 9 to 5 or 11 to 3, whatever your hours, not knowing or knowing and accepting that there's a good chance, a better than average chance of anyone else in occupation, that you may not make it home. You may not see your family again. And we need to understand that, and we need to remind ourselves about that, because this is another good point, David, that you make me think of. We have so many hardworking police officers in this country that trying to defend the laws and American people every day. They have targets on their back because of a political party in this country that has deemed if we criminalize or just can get people to turn on police, then we can get them to vote for us. Because that is why they're doing it. A political party in this country is willing to watch people die, as Mary Low IQ Lightfoot does in Chicago every day and every weekend. Black people are dying in Chicago because that mayor wants more power. And she wants to take it even, who knows what her ambitions are. But it's just amazing. And instead of tying the hands of the criminals, she's tying the hands of police officers. So it is no wonder that you have officers in Seattle, city of Atlanta, officers all across the Detroit, New Orleans, San Francisco that are retiring and leaving or going to other states and other municipalities because they don't want to get killed.
Look at the numbers, look at the numbers of this past weekend for Chicago, for New York.
Oh, my goodness. Glad you brought that up, David. So in New York City last week, I believe it was actually before the weekend, there was a thug trying to murder another, I don't know who he's trying to murder, ran up in broad daylight in the front of a bodega. If you don't know what a bodega is, it is a market, a supermarket, a grocery store. A 10-year-old girl and her 5-year-old brother were caught in the middle. And you can see this video too. You might have to do a DuckDuckGo search because the mainstream media doesn't want you to see this, because you had a thug come after someone else trying to murder them on the streets, on the sidewalk, broad daylight. And this 10-year-old girl, David, threw herself over her 5-year-old brother. She was willing to sacrifice. How does a 10-year-old process, and why on earth in this country, in the United States, do we have a city like New York where a 10-year-old girl has to make the decision, do I run or do I throw myself on top of my 5-year-old brother to try and shield him from gunfire? And the gunman practically stepped on her because the victim was trying to hide amongst this 10-year-old and 5-year-old girl because they all got trampled on with each other. The gunman, the thug, was reaching around the girl trying to shoot this man. And then he just started shooting like crazy. It is a miracle that this girl wasn't shot, and a miracle that her brother wasn't shot. This is in the streets of New York this past week that happened in New York City. Again, run by Democrats, no elected Republican in sight. Look, folks, what David is saying brings up a good point that just popped in my head. We don't have to worry about white supremacy today. We have to worry about bad governance. It is the actions of bad elected officials that are causing most of the problems that we're seeing in the country today. Bad governance. And folks, you and me and David, we all have the power because we got to vote these idiots out. And you people, my listeners that are up in New York City, I know that there's a few of you that don't vote for Democrats, but you've got to start talking to your neighbors. You've got to start talking to them. Show them the video of a 10-year-old girl having to make a decision to cover the body of her 5-year-old brother so he doesn't get shot. They're having to do that in broad daylight in the city of New York, run by Democrats.
Just think if the governor and the mayor of New York were as quality as that little girl's parents.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
I mean, you got what she did was incredible, but she just didn't just process.
Right, she had to learn that.
Her mother or her dad said, "Be sure and take care of
your family, take care
your
of your little brother."
Yeah, and
David, that's a great point.
And this is what we're missing in our country today, is parental guidance.
Well, this is what we're missing by destroying the nuclear family.
That's it. Absolutely.
I mean, look, yeah.
When you don't have a father in the household, or you don't, and it's tough raising kids when both parents are there.
Let alone one single parent.
And
David, you are just lining them up and hitting them out of the park today, and that's why you're legendary, Dave. But you're right. I think about it. So many children are being raised in single parents' houses, and sometimes it can't be avoided. But you've got groups like the Marxist group BLM, which on their website, folks, it may have been taken down now, but you can find it before on snapshots of their website, where they said we need to get rid of the nuclear family. They don't want a mother and a father in the home. They don't want the traditional marriage. And I don't care if it's 2 dads and 2 moms. 2 parents are better than one, or 2 parents, let's just say, can be more effective than one. Not that there aren't successful single parents out there, because there are. But what David's point is that you've got and the data shows this, that you've got the less likelihood of becoming a thug if you've got a 2-parent household. I guess that's the best way I can put it, David.
That is, but it's true. And the other thing that has to be in the household is love.
Yeah.
And,
my goodness, that's true. Not hate.
Yeah.
And what's being taught, David? David, again, you're hitting on all cylinders, David. I can tell you, I was probably 25 years old. I was working for a company, and I just happened to be outside of the business, and I saw a young lady pull her child, and she was disciplining him, and I'm going, gosh, I wonder what he did. And I could not believe it, but this lady, this mother, who I assume was a single mom, pulled her child and said, and looked at him, and I was right there. I was right next to her, and she didn't hesitate. Maybe because she knew I was brown and didn't think I would care. But she told her son, this kid couldn't have been 5-6 years old, but she told him, you aren't going to make it because it's a white world. You won't make it. You have to listen because white people are going to hate you, and other people are going to, she was saying this to him. That's not love, as you say, David, as you mentioned. That's not love. And let me contrast that with how I was brought up. I had my mom and my dad. I had my father, who was being called a spick and had been called a wetback. I witnessed it before. Who told me, don't let these kind of things bother you. You may be brown, but never ever will anyone hold you back other than yourself. That's love. And that's what's me. Hard love needs to be taught, David, and you're 100% right. All right, folks, that's all we got time for today. Be sure to tune back in next week. We'll have more. All right, folks, we're out of here.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.